actions based upon where you're going. And so what they want to do is take that information and then use it to basically weaponize this information against their users, so that way their users could see different things that may affect their mood and may affect how they interact with others. And that's something that is highly unethical. It appears that some young people may have been so affected by this that they may have done harm to themselves based upon what they saw on their Facebook feed, and it was all because of these experiments.
The thing is that we have no standing with Facebook. We're not citizens of Facebook. We have no vote on Facebook. It's not a democracy. And this process is not a way we can design the future. We can't rely on this single company to invent our digital future.
Basically, there's legislation in this country that says that if you are a platform, you are not liable for what people publish on you. However, if you start to edit what people publish on your platform, then your legal obligations increase.
We really, I think, should be concerned when these companies that represent themselves as neutral platforms are actually exercising editorial control and pushing particular political viewpoints, because they're enjoying a special protected legal status on the theory that they're providing a neutral platform for people to speak, to have a diversity of views, and so forth. And that status is based on Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, which protects them from legal liability. And so this is the magic sauce from a legal standpoint that makes these large platform companies possible, is they're not legally responsible for the things that people say on their sites. It's the people who say the things on their sites who bear legal responsibility. If they had to be legally responsible for everything that everyone says on their sites, their business model would break down. It wouldn't work very well. But I think that there's something wrong when you use the legal liability that you were given to be a neutral platform. At the same time, you're exercising very aggressive editorial control to essentially pick sides politically.
Does Facebook consider itself to be a neutral public forum? And representatives of your company have given conflicting answers on this. Are you a First Amendment speaker expressing your views, or are you a neutral public forum allowing everyone to speak?
Senator, here's how we think about this. I don't believe that there is certain content that clearly we do not allow, right? Hate speech, terrorist content, nudity, anything that makes people feel unsafe in the community. From that perspective, that's why we generally try to refer to what we do as a platform for all ideas.
Let me try, just because the time is constrained. It's just a simple question. The predicate for Section 230 immunity under the CDA is that you are a neutral public forum. Do you consider yourself a neutral public forum, or are you engaged in political speech, which is your right under the First Amendment?
Well, Senator, our goal is certainly not to engage in political speech. I'm not that familiar with the specific legal language of the law that you speak to, so I would need to follow up with you on that.
If you're going to continue to behave the way that you behave now, which is by editing content, filtering it, and steering the conversation the way you want it to go for political purposes, you are going to be regulated every bit as much as any media company. So what makes sense with this approach is it essentially allows the tech companies to decide, now that they've grown up, what do they actually want to be? And it's a choice that they should make, but they should be forced to make the choice and not hide behind this fraud of legislation that gives them a free hand when they don't deserve a free hand.
There's what I call the creepy line, and the Google policy about a lot of these things is to get right up to the creepy line but not cross it.
Google crosses the creepy line every day. Not only does Google cross the creepy line, the location of that line keeps shifting.
Well, it's an interesting word, creepy, right? Because it's a word that connotes horror. He didn't say dangerous. He didn't say unethical. There's all sorts of words that could have fit in that slot. He said creepy. And a creep is someone who creeps around and follows you and spies on you for unsavory purposes, right? That's the definition of a creep. You know, I don't think the typical ethical person says, I'm going to push right up to the line of creepy and stop there. You know, they say more something like, how about we don't get near enough to the creepy line so that we're ever engaging in even pseudo-creepy behavior. Because creepy is really bad, you know, it's a creepy mugger is worse than a mugger. The mugger wants your money. God only knows what the creepy mugger wants. It's more than your money.
You give Google a lot of information. You're searching for the most private stuff on Google. You're searching about, illnesses and diseases that your family have. You're searching about things that might be your wife or your spouse might not want you to know about. And you're telling Google more than you would tell a family member or your spouse or a very close friend. And Google has so much information about you that it's scary.
For Google alone, we're studying 3 very powerful ways in which they're impacting people's opinions. This phenomenon that we discovered a few years ago, SEAM, Search Engine Manipulation Effect, is a list effect. List effect is an effect that a list has on some aspects of our cognitive functioning. What's higher in a list is easier to remember, for example. SEAM is an example of a list effect, but with a difference, because it's the only list effect I'm aware of that is supported by a daily regimen of operant conditioning that tells us that what's at the top of search results is better and truer than what's lower in the list.
It's gotten to a point that fewer than 5% of people click beyond page 1 because the stuff that on page 1 and typically at the top in that sort of above the fold position is the best.
Most of the searches that we conduct are just simple routine searches. What is the capital of Kansas? And on those simple searches, over and over again, the correct answer arises right at the top. So we are learning over and over and over again. And then the day comes when we look something up that we're really unsure about, like where should I go on vacation? Which car should I buy? Like, which candidate should I vote for? And we do our little search, and there are results. And what do we know? What's at the top is better. What's at the top is truer. That is why it's so easy to use search results to shift people's opinions. This kind of phenomenon, this is really scary compared to something like fake news because it's invisible. There's a manipulation occurring. They can't see it. It's not competitive because, well, for one thing, Google, for all intents and purposes, has no competitors. Google controls 90% of search in most of the world. Google is only going to show you one list in one order, which have a dramatic impact on the decisions people make, on people's opinions, beliefs, and so on.
The second thing they do is what you might call the auto fill-in. If you are searching for a political candidate, Congressman John Smith, you type in Congressman John Smith and they will give you several options that will be a prompt, as it were, as to what you might be looking for.
If you have 4 positive search suggestions for a candidate, well, guess what happens? SEAM happens. People whose opinions can be shifted shift because people are likely to click on one of those suggestions. That's going to bring them search results, obviously, that favor that candidate. That is going to connect them to web pages that favor that candidate. But now we know that if you allow just one negative to appear in that list, it wipes out the shift completely because of a phenomenon called negativity bias. One negative can, in some demographic groups, draw 10 to 15 times as many clicks as a neutral item in the same list. Turns out that Google is manipulating your opinions from the very first character that you type into the search bar. So this is an incredibly powerful and simple means of manipulation. If you are a search engine company and you want to support one candidate or one cause or one product or one company, just suppress negatives in your search suggestion. All kinds of people over time will shift their opinions in that direction where you want them to shift. But you don't suppress negatives for the other candidate, the other cause, the other product. And then third, very often Google gives you a box. So they will give you search results, but they're below the box, and up above is a box, and the box just gives you the answer.
When it comes to local search, which it turns out is the most common thing people do on Google, 40% of all searches, it's not so clear. If I'm doing a search for a pediatrician in Scranton, Pennsylvania, what happens is Google still bisects the page, shoves the organic meritocracy-based information far down the page, and plops its answer box up at the top. But it's populating that box with its own sort of restricted set of information that it's kind of drawing from its own kind of proprietary sandbox. These are just Google's reviews that it's attempted to collect over the years. Users are habituated to assume the stuff at the top is the best. but instead it's just what Google wants them to see, and it looks the same. And what happens is Google is basically able to put its hand on the scale and create this direct consumer harm, because that mom searching for the pediatrician in Scranton is not finding the highest rated pediatrician according to Google's own algorithms. She's just getting served the Google thing no matter what. And that, I think, is leading to, terrible outcomes in the offline world.
So Google has at its disposal on the search engine itself at least 3 different ways of impacting your opinion. And it is using them. We're talking about a single company having the power to shift the opinions of literally billions of people without anyone having the slightest idea that they're doing so.
Let me ask you guys about, switching gears, I want to ask you about sort of privacy and information. We have a phone that you're talking about that will be, I guess, technically always on. We have Google, which basically maybe knows what I'm going to ask for before I ask for it. It finishes my search request. It knows everything that's going on in my household. Should I be concerned about how much you know about me?
We've had this question for more than a decade at Google, and our answer is always the same. You have control over the information that we have about you. You can actually have it deleted. You can also search anonymously. You get to choose not to give us this information. But if you give it to us, we can do a better job of making better services for you. And I think that's the right answer. These computer systems naturally collect this data, but we also forget it after a while, and we've written down why and how.
Google wants you very much to have privacy from everyone except them.
The first thing we all should do is quit using Gmail. Google stores, analyzes all Gmails that we write and all the incoming emails that we read, the ones coming from other email services. Google tracks it all. They not only track the Gmails that you write, they track the drafts of those crazy emails that you decided not to send. And the information from Gmail is then put into one's personal profile and becomes another source of information they have for sending people targeted ads.
Tech giants are increasingly under scrutiny from politicians, regulators, and experts on the left and the right. Some are concerned about their growing power, even calling them monopolies. And the tension keeps building. Yet their role in contemporary life certainly isn't shrinking. We too at the NewsHour have collaborated with Facebook, Google, and many other new media businesses.
Journalists whom I communicate with regularly about these issues, including journalists at Time Magazine, The Guardian, The Hill, I could go on and on. They're using Gmail. Not only that, their companies are using a form of Gmail. Their emails are running through Google servers. All of their incoming and outgoing communications are being monitored by Google. This is happening also in major universities. If you entered the University of California after a certain date, guess what? You're using Gmail whether you know it or not.
And it was found that Google was, yes, in fact, scanning student emails for non-educational purposes. And what those non-educational purposes were, we still don't know to this day, because Google still has not come clean with what they were doing with the information. They still haven't certified that they have deleted that data. The big challenge was when I found out that Google was scanning our student emails for advertising purposes and other non-educational purposes, I went to my state lawmakers and I tried to encourage them to introduce legislation that would ban these practices. When I went to the State House, who was there lobbying against any stronger privacy protections for our kids? It was Google and Facebook.
Well, I guess it makes sense that so many parts of our life would be influenced by Google. But guess what? The federal government runs on Google. So if you're counting on the federal government to regulate Google, realize that the federal government is using Google Docs. They're using Google tools. In some cases, they're even linked to Gmail. So Google has fused itself with our federal government in so many ways.
The government's motivation for using it is, well, Google's already done it. And they have this thing that works. It seems to be working pretty well for consumers. So the idea behind it was, well, hey, we'll just put some government agencies on Google Documents. Or, we'll use Google Cloud for some things. They lack the technical expertise to have the necessary security on it, and then it becomes